Once upon a time, in a small, dusty cottage nestled at the edge of a vast, green forest, lived a young boy named Marco with his widowed mother. Times were tough. The fields that once yielded plump vegetables were now barren, and their last hen had stopped laying eggs. Their only remaining possession of any value was their gentle brown cow, Daisy. One morning, with a heavy heart, Marco's mother told him, "Marco, my dear, we have nothing left to eat. You must take Daisy to the market and sell her. Get the best price you can." Marco was heartbroken. Daisy was more than just a cow to him, she was his friend. But seeing the desperation in his mother's eyes, he nodded sadly. He tied a rope around Daisy's neck and began the long walk to town. The sun beat down, and the path seemed to stretch on forever. About halfway to the market, he came across a peculiar-looking old man sitting on a tree stump. The man had a long, wispy beard and eyes that twinkled with a strange light. "Good morning, young lad," the old man chirped. "And where might you be going with such a fine-looking cow?" "I'm taking her to the market to sell," Marco replied, his voice barely a whisper. "We need the money for food." The old man's eyes gleamed. He reached into a small leather pouch and pulled out 5 colorful, shimmering beans. "I have a deal for you that's far better than any you find at the market," he said, holding them out. "These aren't ordinary beans, they're magic beans. Trade me your cow for these, and I promise your fortune will be made." Marco hesitated. Magic beans? It sounded too good to be true. But there was something about the man's confident smile and the mesmerizing glow of the beans that captivated him. He imagined the wonderful things magic could do for him and his mother. Without a second thought, he untied Daisy's rope, handed it to the old man, and took the 5 beans. He sprinted all the way home, his heart pounding with excitement. When he burst through the door and showed his mother the beans, her face fell. "You did what?" she cried, her voice trembling with anger and disappointment. "You traded our only cow for a handful of worthless beans. How could you be so foolish?" In her frustration, she snatched the beans from his hand and threw them out the window into the garden. That night, Marco went to bed with an empty stomach and a heavy heart, convinced he had made a terrible mistake. But when Marco woke the next morning, something was different. A strange green light filtered through his window. He leaped out of bed and gasped. Where the beans had landed, a colossal beanstalk had sprouted, so thick and tall that it disappeared into the clouds. Its leaves were the size of dinner plates, and it twisted upwards like a giant green staircase. Forgetting his hunger and his mother's anger, Marco was filled with a sense of adventure. This was magic. Without a moment's hesitation, he ran outside and began to climb. He climbed and climbed, up through the cool morning air, past soaring birds and fluffy white clouds. The world below grew smaller and smaller until his cottage was just a tiny speck. After what felt like hours, he finally reached the top. He found himself standing on a solid cloud, like a vast white island in the sky. In the distance, a magnificent castle towered over the landscape, its turrets scraping the heavens. A wide, smooth road paved with gold led straight to its enormous front door. Driven by curiosity, Marco followed the road. The castle door was slightly ajar, and he cautiously peeked inside. The entrance hall was immense, with furniture so large it looked like it belonged to a giant, and it did. Suddenly, the floor began to tremble. A booming voice echoed through the halls. "Fee-fee-fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman." Marco dove behind a gigantic salt shaker just as a huge giant stomped into the room. The giant was a monstrous figure with a tangled beard and a club slung over his shoulder. He sniffed the air suspiciously but didn't see Marco. He sat down at his enormous table, and a moment later, a giantess entered, carrying a massive plate of food. After his meal, the giant bellowed, "Wife, bring me my treasures." The giantess returned, first with a small hen. "Lay," the giant commanded, and the hen laid a perfect, solid gold egg. Marco watched in awe. This must be the source of the giant's wealth. Next, the giantess brought in a beautiful golden harp. "Sing," the giant ordered, and the harp began to play the most enchanting melody Marco had ever heard. The music was so soothing that the giant soon fell fast asleep, his snores rumbling like thunder. Seeing his chance, Marco tiptoed out from his hiding place. He knew what he had to do. This giant was a thief, living in luxury while people like him and his mother starved. First, he snatched the little hen. It clucked in protest, but Marco held it tight and scurried back towards the beanstalk. He carefully climbed down, the hen tucked under his arm. His mother was overjoyed to see him alive. When the hen laid a golden egg right on their kitchen table, her eyes widened in disbelief. For a while, they lived comfortably. They sold the golden eggs and bought everything they needed. But Marco couldn't forget the beautiful harp and the giant's stolen wealth. Greed began to gnaw at him. So, a few weeks later, he climbed the beanstalk again. He snuck back into the castle, waited for the giant to fall asleep to the harp's music, and this time, he grabbed the golden harp. But as he lifted it, the harp cried out in a clear voice, "Master, master, a thief is stealing me." The giant woke with a furious roar. He saw Marco running with his harp and charged after him. "Fee-fa-fo, I'll grind your bones to make my bread," he bellowed. Marco scrambled for his life. He reached the beanstalk and began to slide down as fast as he could, the giant's heavy footsteps thudding on the stalk above him. "Mother, get the axe," he yelled as he neared the bottom. His mother, hearing the commotion and the giant's angry shouts, rushed out with their sharpest axe. The moment Marco's feet touched the ground, he grabbed the axe and began to chop at the base of the beanstalk with all his might. He swung and swung, the axe biting deep into the thick stalk. With a final mighty chop, the beanstalk began to creak and groan. It swayed violently, and then, with a tremendous crash, it came tumbling down, bringing the giant with it. The ground shook with the impact, and that was the end of the fearsome giant. From that day on, Marco and his mother lived in peace and comfort. They had the hen that laid golden eggs and the magical harp that filled their small cottage with beautiful music. Marco had learned a valuable lesson about bravery and taking risks, but he also learned about the dangers of greed. He never forgot the towering beanstalk or the castle in the clouds, but he was content with his life on the ground, rich, not just in gold, but in the love of his mother and the music of his magical harp. And they all lived happily ever after.